As teachers, we know exactly what our students need. The challenge is turning all of that professional judgment, our learning outcomes, curriculum, learner needs, teaching approach, assessment expectations, and source material into one precise AI prompt. That is exactly what Teacherprompt is designed to do. And as you'll see in this demonstration, it starts right here on your own computer. Welcome to Teacherprompt. From the home screen, I can start with what I actually need to create. Plan a lesson, create teaching materials, build an assessment, or plan learner support. I can define my grade, subject, curriculum, or framework, preferred creation mode, lesson duration, guidance level, and even my confidence with classroom technology. But one of the most important features is local first control. Teacherprompt processes supported files and builds prompts locally in the browser. It does not connect directly to an AI service. I remain in control of my source text, locally stored information, backup, and history. For this demonstration, I'll use a grade 12 physics lesson on centripetal and centrifugal force. Let's start with quick mode. This is designed for teachers who want a structured, high-quality prompt without working through every advanced instructional setting. I create a new lesson and enter the essential context. Grade 12. Physics. The topic, centripetal force and centrifugal force. I can also define a specific learning focus, so the AI does not have to guess what the lesson is really about. Then I identify what I want students to learn. This is an important distinction. Teacherprompt gives the teacher control over the learning outcomes. Instead of allowing AI to invent the foundation of the lesson, I can enter, paste, or use learning outcomes that I have already approved. Because if the learning outcomes are wrong, even a beautifully written AI lesson can still be the wrong lesson. Here I add the intended learning outcomes for this lesson. Teacherprompt treats those outcomes as an authoritative instructional reference. For this physics example, students need to distinguish between centripetal and centrifugal force, understand the direction of the real resultant force in circular motion, and recognize centrifugal force as frame-dependent. They also need to apply the relationship involved in circular motion and identify real forces that can provide the required centripetal force. Teacherprompt then structures the instructional decisions around those outcomes. It considers what students need to know, what they need to do, the intended level of learning, and an appropriate instructional approach. Notice what is happening here. I am not manually writing a giant prompt. I am making teaching decisions. Teacherprompt translates those decisions into a complete and structured instruction for AI. That is the difference. Once the lesson context is established, Teacherprompt creates a reusable lesson design. Now, I can choose what I want to produce. A lesson plan, a complete lesson suite, lesson slides, learning activities, a worksheet, an assessment, a rubric, homework, accessibility and learning supports, or technology recommendations. I don't need to explain the same class, topic, learning outcomes, teaching strategy, and instructional expectations again every time I need a new resource. The lesson becomes the common instructional foundation. For this example, I'll create the lesson plan. Teacherprompt builds the complete prompt with the instructional context, approved learning outcomes, source rules, pedagogical expectations, output requirements, and quality checks. Then I simply copy it. Now I move to ChatGPT. And this is important. Teacherprompt is not trying to replace the AI tools you already use. It helps you use them better. I paste the prompt created by Teacherprompt into ChatGPT. Compare this with a typical request such as, create a grade 12 lesson about centripetal force. The AI now receives much more than a topic. It receives a professional instructional brief. It knows the grade level, the subject, the lesson duration, the approved learning outcomes, the conceptual distinctions students must understand, the instructional approach, the expected learner actions, the checks for understanding, the assessment expectations, and the boundaries it should not cross. As ChatGPT develops the lesson, the response stays focused on the actual instructional intent. The lesson differentiates between the real inward resultant force and the apparent centrifugal effect experienced in a rotating frame. It includes learner actions, questioning, checks for understanding, application, and assessment. The result is not valuable because AI wrote more. It is valuable because the AI received better instructional context. That is what Teacherprompt is built to provide. Quick mode is useful when I want to move fast, but sometimes a lesson needs more control. That is where advanced mode comes in. I start with the same core lesson information, but now Teacherprompt takes me deeper into the learning design. I can specify the primary learning priority and additional priorities. I can select the instructional approach, and I can define learner readiness. I can also describe learner needs or barriers that should influence the lesson design. For example, students may understand the mathematical equation but still confuse centripetal force with an additional physical force. That misconception can become part of the prompt. I can also enter accessibility needs, practical constraints, available technology, the classroom display environment, my own technology confidence, and other implementation details. These may look like small decisions, but together, they are the difference between generic AI content and something designed for a real classroom. Now, let's look at another important part of the workflow: source control. Here I work with the physics source material for the lesson. Teacherprompt can process supported PDF text locally and allow me to review the extracted content. I can inspect the text before using it, and if necessary, I can refine or replace it. I decide what source information belongs in the final prompt. This is especially useful for teachers who want AI output grounded in their actual curriculum material, but do not want to upload an entire textbook or document blindly into an AI platform. The principle is simple. The teacher decides what the system reads, what the teacher approves, and what is ultimately included in the prompt. Before creating resources, Teacherprompt gives me a review stage. Here I can see the proposed lesson design and any recommendations. I can edit the lesson context. I can apply recommendations. Or I can confirm the design. Once I'm satisfied, I approve and lock the lesson. The approved lesson design now becomes the reference point for everything that follows. The learning outcomes remain the same. The scope remains the same. The terminology remains consistent. And every new resource is built around the same instructional decisions. Now that the lesson is approved, I return to the resource workspace. The same lesson can support an entire set of aligned teaching materials. I choose the exact resource I need and customize its settings when necessary. Teacherprompt then prepares the prompt. I can review it before using it, see what source information is included, and copy the finished prompt when I'm ready. Again, nothing is generated by AI inside Teacherprompt. Teacherprompt's role is to transform my instructional decisions into a structured, reusable, high-quality instruction for AI. Now I take that prompt back to ChatGPT. I paste the prompt into ChatGPT and ask for the lesson plan. Because the requirements are already embedded in the prompt, I don't need a long back and forth conversation explaining what I meant. ChatGPT can work from the approved lesson context and produce the requested resource. In this demonstration, The completed lesson plan is also exported as a Word document. And here it is, a structured lesson plan that I can open, review, edit, customize, and continue developing like any normal teaching document. Teacherprompt does not replace teacher review. The teacher remains responsible for the final material. What Teacherprompt reduces is the repetitive work of rebuilding instructional context every time we use AI. As we review the generated lesson, notice how the sections connect back to the original design. The learning outcomes are preserved. The success criteria reflect the intended conceptual distinction. The lesson develops through a logical instructional sequence. Learners are asked to observe, reason, explain, compare, calculate, and apply. There are checks for understanding. There is practical performance. There is assessment alignment. And there is time validation against the available 55-minute lesson. This is exactly why prompt quality matters. A short generic prompt often forces the AI to make dozens of hidden assumptions. What grade? What level of prior knowledge? What learning outcomes? What assessment? What teaching approach? What misconceptions? What source? What level of detail? What should remain unchanged? Every unanswered question becomes an opportunity for AI to guess. Teacherprompt reduces that uncertainty by turning your professional decisions into explicit instructions. You still review the result. You still apply your professional judgment. But you begin from a much stronger first draft. Now watch what happens next. I don't need to build the lesson again. The approved lesson already exists. I simply create another resource. This time, lesson slides. I can specify the approximate slide count and the visual style I want. The learning outcomes, lesson scope, learner context, teaching approach, and instructional expectations are already connected to the approved lesson design. So I create a new prompt specifically for the slides. One lesson design, multiple resources. No need to start over. When I paste the new prompt into ChatGPT, notice how specific it is. This is not simply asking an AI to make a PowerPoint. The prompt tells the AI what the slides are for, what learning they must support, which instructional decisions must remain fixed, how the lesson should progress, and what should be checked before the final output is returned. A lesson plan and a slide deck do not serve the same purpose. Good slides are not a lesson plan copied onto a screen. They need a different structure, different information density, clear learner-facing language, visual sequencing, activities, prompts, checks for understanding, and alignment with what the teacher is actually going to do in class. Teacherprompt creates the prompt for the specific resource while preserving the lesson behind it. While ChatGPT creates the presentation, this is where the bigger value of Teacherprompt becomes clear. Most educators do not need another library containing hundreds of generic prompts. Teacherprompt gives you that workflow, your grade, your subject, your curriculum, your learners, your source material, your instructional approach, your classroom constraints, your assessment expectations, your preferred output, all organized into one coherent instruction for AI. And because the lesson design is reusable, you can move from planning to teaching materials, assessment, learner support, and other resources without repeatedly rebuilding the context. Teacherprompt also separates two jobs that are often confused. The teacher makes the educational decisions. The AI helps produce the resource. Teacherprompt connects the two. This is especially valuable if you already use AI but spend too much time rewriting prompts, correcting generic outputs, repeating the same information, or discovering that one AI-generated resource no longer matches another. Instead of asking AI to decide what your lesson should be, you give it a much clearer specification of what you have already decided. And because Teacherprompt is not tied to one AI model, the prompt can move with you. And here is the result. ChatGPT has produced the presentation file. When we open it, the slides reflect the approved lesson instead of starting from a completely new interpretation of the topic. We see learner-facing content, conceptual distinctions, practical application, and success expectations connected to the same lesson design. As with any AI-generated material, the teacher should always review the final output before using it with students. Teacherprompt does not remove professional judgment. It gives that judgment a stronger way to guide AI. And Teacherprompt is not locked to ChatGPT. Here, I can take the instructional prompt into Gemini as well. The format of the final resource may change, but the instructional logic created in Teacherprompt travels with the prompt. That means you can work with the AI tool that fits your workflow instead of building your entire teaching process around one provider. Teacherprompt is not about replacing teachers. It is about giving educators a practical system for getting more precise, more consistent, and more instructionally grounded results from the AI tools they already use. If you want your learning outcomes to stay at the center of the lesson, more control over your source material, and connected teaching resources without rebuilding the same context again and again, Teacherprompt was built for that. Build the lesson once. Approve the instructional design. Create the resources you need. And let your teaching decisions guide the AI, not the other way around. Teacherprompt. Better context. Better prompts. Better teaching resources. Use the link in the description to get Teacherprompt and start building your next lesson with a more structured AI workflow.